Now, Les is the founder of Predictable Success. He is a serial entrepreneur who has started more than 40 ventures in his own right. He is also a globally sought after coach and consultant to growth leaders across the world. And by the way, he's the author of 2 of the most wildly popular books on organizational growth. I'm talking about Predictable Success, getting your organization on the growth track and keeping it there, as well as Do Scale. No one knows more about how to scale literally any business or non-for-profit than Les. So let's talk with him now.
Hello, Katy.
Hello. So within Predictable Success, there are 3 somewhat distinct areas that any entrepreneur or leader may fall into. The launch phase, they're trying to start a new venture. The grow phase, where they're trying to take that now launched venture into profitability and predictable success. And then the lead phase, where the goal is really to become the best possible leader, him or herself, and then help the team in turn become highly effective growth leaders. So I'd like to focus today, Les, on that grow phase. What are some of the things that specifically identify a venture or a business as being ready to grow and to scale?
There are 3 specific things that are different. They're very different. We'll see that a little later, but they're very clear and very obvious. First of all, there are the folks who haven't actually caught the growth wave yet. So they've launched something, and it's fantastic to have launched it. But it really feels like, you've been going down the runway, going down the runway, going down the runway, going down the runway. We just haven't taken off. So that's the first phase. And it typically happens relatively early on, right out of the gate. The second group are those folks who did that. They took off and they had great growth and things were super for quite a while. And then that very growth itself began to overwhelm them. The complexity that comes along with it means that we know we can grow more, we know there's more out there, but we can't get to it because this complexity is beating us up. We're filling in potholes all the time. So that group needs to conquer complexity. So with the folks that need to catch the wave in the first place, but the folks that need to conquer complexity. And then the third group are the folks who have done both of those things and then had a period of time really at the sort of peak stage of growth, but they have overcooked it. They've put in too many processes, too many systems. They've sort of lost their mojo, and they're thinking, where has the magic gone? Now, that group needs to explode bureaucracy. So we've got the folks that need to catch the growth wave in the first place. The folks that did that now need to conquer complexity. And the folks who did that, but they've lost their mojo, and they need to explode bureaucracy.
Okay, so I find that especially interesting because when we talk about leadership and when we talk about business, I think we tend to just use that word growth as really the one-stop shop for what we're trying to do. And you've carved out these layers inside of that. Can you talk a little bit more about if somebody is hearing that and they think, oh, that's me, I've launched and I'm ready for the next step, but I don't know exactly what piece I'm missing. How can they best determine what that is and then take action?
Yeah, it's a great question because that's the main problem that folks who are trying to grow their venture, whether it's a for-profit or not-for-profit, face. It's not the lack of available information out there. I mean, you could spend a lifetime doing nothing but reading books and scholarly articles and taking courses on things to do to grow your business. What very few people tell you is what you need to do next in the place that you're at. So it's like walking into a pantry stuffed with every possible ingredient and thinking, well, what do I make? How do I know? So what we try to do is to help people, first of all, be really clear about where they are in those 3 buckets. Do they need to catch the growth wave? Do they need to conquer complexity? Do they need to explode bureaucracy? So that's the first thing. Where are you? Because they're very different next steps. That's the very important thing. The second thing is to really identify where you want to go to. Every journey has a destination. If you're not very clear about that destination, it's hard to get excited. When you get lost, sometimes you might just give up. So one of the things that we try to do is help people get really clear. Where do you want to go to? What does growth look like for you? So we now know where we're starting from. Do we need to catch the growth wave? Do we need to conquer complexity? Do we need to explode bureaucracy? Secondly, we know where we want to get to. The next step is let's just develop the roadmap to get us there. And the key in all of that, as I said right at the start, is to know what the next steps are for you in the situation that you're in. You know, a lot of stuff out there about what to do. Very few people tell you when to do it. And that's what we do.
I really love your analogy of pulling in the wrong ingredients, because it feels to me, and I'd love for you to speak from your own personal experience launching ventures, and I'm guessing maybe making some bad decisions or some decisions that you wish you could go back and you learned from and you're now imparting. But if somebody is too focused on the wrong thing, whether they have self-identified it incorrectly or they are just listening to all of the noise in the marketplace, what happens? I imagine it's like trying to make, you know, a cake with the wrong kind of sugar, or omitting the sugar altogether. And can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, what the consequences are?
I'll give you two very specific examples. So let's say you've got, but let's talk about a for-profit business. The principles apply equally to not-for-profit. You've got a for-profit chain of coffee shops. You opened one, you loved it, it was your passion, everybody loved you. You opened a second one. And before you know it, a few years down the line, you got 7 of these things. And it's really killing you. Just the sheer maintenance of this, managing this thing, which is much larger than you had initially envisaged. You've got to put some systems and processes in place. You've got to start learning how to bulk purchase. You've got to start learning about how to freeze your ingredients, you know, to push our analogy. You got to start learning how to onboard and train managers for those 5 outlets that you can't be at every day. And those are the right things to do. You've got to put those systems and processes in. If, on the other hand, you just open your first coffee shop, you know, and people aren't coming in, those are absolutely the wrong things to do. You're just going to waste your time and slow down your growth, and you probably put yourself out of business too early. Whereas if we just flip it the other way around, if that is you, you're trying to catch the growth wave, and you just walk around town handing out flyers. Hey, new coffee shop. Here, take this free muffin. You know, take this $10 coupon. You know, just get people in the store. That works. That's the right thing to do. You try doing that when you've got your 7, 8, 9 outlets, and you're getting slaughtered by people coming in through the door that you can't service well, who you're giving a bad experience to. The last thing you should be doing is going out there and pushing more people in at this point. So, you know, and the fact that I owned a chain of Pizza Huts might be where some of that pain comes from, because I remember doing exactly that, getting the wrong growth strategies taking the right growth strategies, but trying to apply them to the wrong stage of growth.
And I'm going to put you on a pedestal for just a moment. I know you won't do it for yourself, but because I am in this space as well, and I'm constantly trying to learn and grow and listen to really well-meaning, smart, successful people, I find too often it is this one approach that works for everyone, or this is the approach that works if you're in this industry, or this is the only way to do it if you're in this industry. And what I think is so interesting and inspiring about your own journey from having launched, 40 something ventures over the last few decades in all of these verticals, nonprofit, for profit, you know, different stages. I would love to hear more about why this approach, this way to look at growth, why is it so agnostic? Why does it apply so successfully regardless of someone's industry or experience or type of business? And I guess, is that true? Does this apply globally rather than narrowly?
Yes, it absolutely does. The process of developing what we now refer to as the predictable success growth model was one of, first of all, observation, and, as you just said, dirty fingernail work, doing it myself. It's not an academic exercise. You know, there were no interns involved at all. It was just me doing it over and over and over again, and then getting the privilege over a number of decades to work with and help literally thousands of other organizations, for-profits and not-for-profits. And what I did specifically was to abstract the principles of healthy, sustainable growth that apply everywhere. That was my goal. My goal was not to work out how to be the best at any specific activity, right? If you want to be a better pizza company, well, I might have a little bit to share because I did that, but that's, making your pizza the best it is, that's down to you. If you're a tailor, tailoring the best clothing in the world, that's down to you. Your core skill, if you're building a church, then having the best worship team imaginable, having the best outreach team imaginable, you've got to deliver the quality of your product and service. But all of the other things, all of the things you've got to do to take that thing that you're so passionate about and you're so good at and to scale it, that's those are the things that are applicable to any group. I shorthand it by saying the predictable success growth principles apply to any group of 2 or more people, and that means up to an infinite number of people. We've worked with organizations that have literally hundreds of thousands of employees. So any group of 2 or more, these principles apply.
I want to pull back some of the words that you've shared and that we've discussed. You talked about the magic being gone. You talked about it not being fun for founders, even if in this scenario, you're really talking about businesses that may even be generating revenue, significant amounts of revenue. So it's not that they aren't successful, it's that there's something that is out of alignment. And so, that magic, that loss of fun, you even went as far to say that the consequence could be that someone could go out of business. I don't want to get too woo with it, but that feels heartbreaking to me, that you could have somebody who's mission driven and has this idea that has been validated. It has launched, it is potentially bringing in money, and yet it can't grow and scale because of this lack of attention to the very specific barrier to growth. Does that break your heart a little bit when you hear stories of like that, or when you encounter somebody who is a great, bold, visionary dreamer, but can't quite get it done?
Yeah, that can happen quite a lot in the group that we talked about earlier, who haven't yet caught the growth wave. So people who have started a new venture, for profit or not for profit, but they just haven't taken off yet. That, like I say, that feel like they were stuck at the gate. You've had those plane journeys where you're stuck at the gate forever, and then you push back and you think, oh, hooray. And then you sit on the apron, what's happening? And then, oh, we're going down the runway. And then the darn thing stops and pulls off. I mean, those folks, there is a danger that, it's not a danger. If you don't get that fixed, you're going to run out of resources at some point. That's part of the whole push that we have in our catching the growth wave materials, is helping people get out of there, because that's the only route to go, is to succeed. There's nowhere else to go. You either get out of there or you're going to fail eventually. In terms of stuff that's heartbreaking, that is really tough. And I've been there. I've failed. In those 42 ventures, 2 of them failed. 2 of them failed spectacularly. And I was living back then in a place where, when you failed, it was known. So they failed spectacularly and embarrassingly. So I know what that's like. But even more, certainly as something that breaks my heart just as much, is for all of the other businesses, not-for-profits, faith-based, cause-based organizations. You look at the folks who need to explode bureaucracy. We're typically working with organizations you would know the names of. I mean, they're, Fortune 100 and similar type organizations. They're not going to go out of business by not getting this right. Even most of the folks who are just trying to overcome complexity, they've been there for some time. Maybe it's still a founder-owned business. They may not be in mortal danger of going out of business, but what they are in mortal danger of on both sides is just having an awful time, just not feeling fulfilled, not feeling that when they put their foot on the gas pedal, that the car is going forward, just being frustrated all of the time. Why does this not work anymore? Why am I not getting the growth that I need? And helping those folks rediscover what they had before is just as satisfying for me as helping folks avoid not getting traction in the first place.
So to clarify, underneath this pillar of growth, so if someone is listening and they have launched their venture and they are ready to grow, they can't wait to take it to the next level, but they don't yet know what their problem is. The three sort of subsets that you have identified are catching the growth wave, conquering complexity, and exploding bureaucracy. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in catching the growth wave group, that's typically a founder or a very small founding team, 2-3 people. And they may or may not have some subcontractors. They may even have some employees, but they really haven't turned this thing into a predictable, profitable venture, or if it's a not-for-profit, a predictably cash positive venture, because the reality is you can't change the world if you can't pay the bills. Mm-hmm. The folks who need to conquer complexity, they may still, very many of them will still be founder-owned businesses, but there'll be a leadership team typically. There'll be quite a group of employees. They will have experienced some years. There'll be a real business. They just got to learn how to move into this next stage of growth where they're working in a much more complex environment than those early catching the growth wave years. The folks that need to explode bureaucracy, they typically, those organizations are long past the founder stage. And you're likely, if you're listening to me and thinking, I need that, I need to find a way to explode bureaucracy in here and get our mojo back, you're probably leading a division, a department of a very large organization, because it's those types of organizations where that type of arthritis creeps in and kills entrepreneurship, kills innovation. So those are really the three groups that we're talking to.
I think it's especially interesting and valuable for people who are listening to this to understand that up until now, this type of insight less has really been done with those organizations and those founders that you mentioned. You go into the business, you work directly with the founder or with the upper level management, and you impart this to the team, and then they take action. But it doesn't feel to me like this has necessarily been as accessible to people who are just watching a training like this, or who are hearing you and this resonates and then they're ready to take action. They would have had to hire you, bring you in. And that's, again, not necessarily accessible to everyone. So I know that you have taken all of this information that you have applied in real world organizations and seen this succeed, and you've now made it more accessible to people. I'm specifically talking about a quiz that you've put together. Can you talk a little bit about, if somebody hears this and they think, I got it, but I have to know which of those barriers to growth I'm facing, how can they determine that now?
Absolutely. They just need to go to predictablesuccess.com/growth quiz, and literally in 10 questions, just boom, 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 you'll be finished it in less than 4 or 5 minutes. You can identify, more likely, if you've listened to this, confirm which of those three groups you're in. But it's really, really important to do that. Really important to be absolutely sure what is your single key growth challenge, because that becomes your North Star. And in the courses that we've built around this, what we do is, for each of those three groups, we take that key growth barrier. So either you've got to catch the growth wave, you got to get lift off, you've got to overcome complexity, or you've got to explode bureaucracy. And we very specifically tell you what you need to do to achieve that. And we filter out all of the really, really good stuff that needs to happen in the other stages, but which aren't relevant to you. And so one of the things in the initial teaching that we do is we let people have a look at, it's really important to see, let's say I'm in the catch the growth wave phase. It's really important for you to see what people in the overcoming complexity and even in the exploding bureaucracy just see at a high level, what are the toolkits that they need to use, so that that's not what you should be doing next. Otherwise, you're going to cook the wrong meal, to go back to our ingredients thing. You know, you think you're making a souffle and you end up with a bowl of chili. That's not good for the people expecting the souffle. So that's what we do, is we help people identify very, very clearly, and you can go to the quiz and do that, which is your key growth challenge. We then use that to focus in on what the next steps are for you to overcome your specific challenge. And we help you identify the things not to do, which is equally important. Not to do yet, not to do now, which is equally important.
I love that too. And I'm hoping that one of the takeaways for people listening is that this is a very clear, time-tested, proven roadmap. And one of the most beautiful things is what you just said right here. You don't have to do all the things. And in fact, if you go back to the analogy that Les shared, if you try to make this cake with too many ingredients or this souffle, it's going to fall flat. Everyone's going to be disappointed. You're not going to have faith in the process the next time you go to make this same beautiful meal. And so I really appreciate, Les, that a lot of what you're saying is you have to be ruthlessly focused, is a phrase that I've heard you say, ruthlessly focused on this specific barrier to growth. And then I imagine you tackle the next barrier, you tackle the next growth challenge, and you build on this. But so for the people who are listening, who are ready to take the quiz, predictablesuccess.com/growth quiz, you get instant results. This is totally free to take, and you're given immediate resources where you can, again, validate maybe what you've been thinking and really start to see not just where you are and where you can go, but how to get there. So thank you so much, Les. I really appreciate your time and look forward to people taking this quiz and understanding their barrier to growth.
Absolutely my pleasure.